My name is Jane Philpott. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our information session as the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences here at Queen's University. And I have to start by just saying how extraordinary it is that so many of you have expressed such enthusiasm to be part of the action table on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so before we go any further, I want to start by asking Courtney Clark to open our time together, acknowledging the land that we're on and making sure that we start our gathering in a good way. So Courtney, over to you.
Thank you. So for those that don't know me, my name is Courtney Clark and I work for the Faculty of Health Sciences. So all three schools as the Indigenous Access and Recruitment Coordinator, and have been here around Queens for about 6 years now doing Indigenous health and Indigenous policy work. So I just will start today by saying a few words in Mohawk, because that is my teachings as an Indigenous woman, to always introduce myself in my Indigenous language first, which happens to be Mohawk. So I'll start and then we'll go into really is and what that means in a short amount of time. So, Sego se wagwego, Courtney Clark, Yongyats. That just means greetings, everyone. My name is Courtney Clark. Tano wata nite wageno. I am from Wata Mohawk Territory, which you would know as Georgian Bay, Muskoka region of Ontario. Ganyan gehaga niwago huenciono, which means I am Mohawk. And Skare Wage, which means I'm a Bear Clan. So if you can't tell already, I am part of a Mohawk Bear Clan. And our tribe would be a part of the Confederacy of the Haudenosaunee people. So how that relates to Queens is that Queens is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee people, as well as the Anishinaabe. It's always been a site for hundreds of years of business, of people meeting, of sustaining life, and we need to acknowledge, when we're acknowledging the land, your own positionality. So my own positionality right now is that I'm privileged to be able to even give a land acknowledgement virtually. A lot of my family members and my at home on the reserve aren't even able to connect to internet. So for me to be here and give this land acknowledgement virtually is a privilege in itself as a Mohawk woman. And being in this role at the university as well, I'm very honored to be able to speak on behalf of my Indigenous people and try and make Queens a better place for our learners. I would also like to say that although we're gathered virtually, Queens is kind of a community, whether we can be there or not together. So I'm glad that we've had over 100 people join today to build this diverse community that we're working so hard to nourish. Land acknowledgement is about everything about you, everything around you in the land, giving thanks to it, seeing how it has sustained you and how you can sustain the land, for generations to come. Our ancestors were stewards, and we've done some damage to the earth, and it's our job and duty, especially as health professionals, to reconcile those damages. If we're discussing higher education and post-secondary, that's also an extraordinary position we have to be in higher education institutions, and we can fix some of the wrongs that have been done in the schooling systems previously in this country. So my role here is to support the truth and reconciliation calls to action, and the roles of health professionals to be culturally safe and to have a duty to make our land and our medicines and our people healthy and well for more generations to come. And this will include the work on this Dean's Action Table, and that is a lot of work, but it will be all interconnected between continued faculty development, curriculum, innovation, decolonization, and student support. So I just want to say Nyawa Goa, which means thank you very much in Mohawk, and I'm glad that everyone is here with open ears and ready to learn, unlearn, and continue to learn.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Courtney. I appreciate that. And I just want to acknowledge the other panelists. I think the only other one that you're seeing probably is Giselle Valorizo. Giselle is our new project manager for equity, diversity, and inclusion here at the Faculty of Health Sciences. I don't think you're seeing Dr. Mala Joneja, but I want to acknowledge that she is here as well. In the background, Mala is the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the School of Medicine, and we're thrilled that she has also joined us tonight, but she's on call, so she might get called away, but I am really grateful that she's joining us this evening. And there are over 120 of you on the call, which is really remarkable. I'm going to give a PowerPoint presentation that will give us a bit of an overview about the Dean's Action Table on Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. But before I do that, like Courtney, I wanted to make a few preliminary remarks. A little bit of housekeeping first, just to clarify so everyone knows that this information session is being recorded and that it will be circulated to all members of the Dean's Action Table on Equity before the end of the week. And I will also note that some of you have sent some questions ahead of time. I'm hoping that I will cover most of those answers in the information session, but of course, if you don't feel that they're properly answered, you can raise them again. When it comes to that time, you will be asked to use the Q&A function on Zoom to pose your questions, and Giselle is going to moderate those questions for us. And if we happen to get an enormous number of questions and we don't get a chance to answer them all, we will be capturing those questions and make sure that they are properly addressed. And I hope you've already discovered that Giselle does a good job of getting back to you for those of you who've reached out, and she'll make sure that you get answers to the questions that you have. So we are gathered here to do the work. Courtney was already describing a little bit about it, but our goal here is to incorporate and expand our commitment to and our demonstration of the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion at the Faculty of Health Sciences, to incorporate those principles fulsomely into our workplace, our teaching, our research, and our clinical care. And you'll notice that this is specifically called an action table because this has got to be about more than notions and aspirations. This is about action. So if you've signed up to be involved, you're not just here to give advice, but we hope that everyone is here to actually act on what we're learning together. I want to, right from the front, acknowledge my own unearned privilege and recognize that that privilege stems from long-standing societal patterns of injustice. And to say that I believe that we collectively have a responsibility to change those patterns as we recognize them. I want to also acknowledge that there are many others who are part of this group tonight who are more expert than I on matters of EDI, but I'm glad that we're all coming together, and despite being in different steps along the way in our journey, we're going to learn as a group. It's really important, I think, to acknowledge our own privilege. Some of you will be familiar with the work of Dr. Stephanie Nixon, who has written a whole bunch of great things, including a really fabulous paper that came out about a year ago talking about the coin model of privilege. And she says in that article that the obliviousness of people about their positions of privilege is a key strategy required to sustain the hegemony of systems of inequality. And so I think the more that we, from time to time, openly acknowledge that privilege, the more we'll be able to ensure that we don't remain oblivious. But I also want to comment on the fact that recognizing that privilege is not intended to evoke a response of either denial or guilt. It's intended to evoke a response of self-reflection and informed action. And some of this work is going to cause discomfort. This discomfort is not surprising. In fact, it's good. It's where the learning occurs. And the more that we recognize that and accept it, the better we'll be able to learn. I think this is really critical work for academic institutions, but in particular those who train health professionals, because the crises and gaps that we see in health outcomes, how some groups have different health outcomes than others based on issues like race or geography, ethnicity. Those continue to be fueled by what is sometimes blatant or insidious systemic, organizational, and personal racism, and often widespread discrimination as well. And you'll know that faculties of health sciences, schools of health professional training have had varied responses across the country. They range from sometimes almost nothing to some that are rather exceptional. But I think we all have to realize that taking on matters of EDI are not an option for us. It's not left to the discretion or the goodwill of the leadership of any particular school or faculty. We all have an obligation to address these issues. And doing so is not a single step journey. It's not something we're going to accomplish in a short period of time. What we're really talking about is a cultural shift. It's a transformation, and it's going to require our permanent attention, evaluation, and adaptation. We're all going to have to be good listeners, find out what people need, be prepared to listen to anger and hurt and pain. Some of that will be repeated. And so hearing people's pain repeatedly is part of our journey, and letting those voices be heard. We will aim throughout all of this to be prepared with the supports that you need, that we need, mental wellness supports, and in particular, making sure that elders are available. We will hopefully by next week be able to announce to you some good news in that regard, but I do encourage you to reach out and let us know if there are areas where you're feeling that you need support in this work. We've got a lot of work to learn and unlearn and relearn together, to learn about cultural protocols, to learn about history, to visit communities that we don't know about, and to learn from them. And then to act on what we hear and speak up when necessary, ultimately knowing that changing those patterns of injustice is our goal. We're going to make mistakes. I've made lots of mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes in this work, but that's how we're going to make progress. And also we're going to make some good friendships along the way. Already those of you who I've worked with on this work, we've really, I think, entered into a good place of friendship and collaboration and collegiality. So with that, I'll just remind you that the correct response is not denial or guilt, it's self-reflection and informed action. And now we're going to tell you a little bit about what some of that action is going to look like and how we propose to go forward. So with that, I will ask if Giselle will hopefully share a PowerPoint. Well done. And if you can get that onto slideshow mode, that's terrific. So I'm going to go through a series of slides, hopefully not take too long to do so, and then open things up for questions. So this is intended to be an information session, and really glad that all of you have come, and that especially that our extra guests are here. So on the next slide, you'll see a bit of an outline for how we're going to do this. As you may have heard, when we put out the call to see who was interested in being part of the Dean's Action Table on EDI, I thought we might get 8 or 10 or 15 people volunteer, but we have had 140 people volunteer, which is pretty extraordinary. And I've heard from many of you, and I thank you for the emails that you've sent me talking about your enthusiasm. When you sent in your request to be involved, each of you provided a little bit of background and story, and I have to tell you that I have read all of those, and I have been incredibly moved by the stories that you've shared. They're very personal stories, really remarkable reasons why you believe that this work is important, and I want to thank you for the time that it took, and possibly the pain that it took to be able to share some of those stories. So what we've done in order to make sure that this is an inclusive process is we want everyone who wants to be involved to find a place in this work. And so to start things off, we have divided the 140 people into 7 different groups of 20 approximately. And you'll see those different groups outlined here on the screen. There will be overlap. You can already see as you look at those different groups that some of them have some bearing on one another. This is not a perfect process, but we hope that it's going to be an effective process to have people working together. Now, we've already been asked about what happens if other people want to be involved. And again, in the spirit of inclusiveness, we're going to try to find a way to encourage others in the Faculty of Health Sciences who want to participate to do so, and we'll adapt our model as we go along based on the number of people that reach out. So please do contact Giselle if you hear of someone else that wants to get involved. Some of you have asked about participants outside of the Faculty of Health Sciences. We want this to be largely a Faculty of Health Sciences focused initiative, but there are a few people outside of the faculty that have already stepped up, and so we're open to hearing from others. But there may be ways that informally or occasionally your group might be able to invite participants from other faculties, and that may in fact be the best way to accommodate those groups. So what are each of these working groups going to do? The next slide will give you a little bit of that outline, because several of you have pointed out the fact that there are already schools that have their own processes. We have a school of nursing, a school of rehabilitation therapy, and a school of medicine, each of which have their own authority structures and admissions processes and curricula, and a whole bunch of people to whom they're accountable. So obviously this is not putting the decision-making authority in the hands of these working groups, but we believe that this will still be a very effective way to be able to have an impact on those more formal authority structures of the schools. And so you'll see in this that we do ask each group to meet monthly. You will know that they have already got at the moment an interim or acting lead of the group or representative of the group that's been chosen, but at your first meeting you will choose a new representative who will participate in the executive table that I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. And the work essentially falls into about 4 main categories that we encourage each group to do. One is to do an environmental scan. So we know that there's already a ton of activity happening in the faculty, but we don't have a place where we've necessarily collected it all. And it might be hard to find all of what's happening, but we encourage you to take your topic and try and do the work necessary to find out what's happening already in the Faculty of Health Sciences on that particular topic related to your group theme. Secondly, we want to encourage you to look out for best practices across the country and even around the world. So if it's something on admissions or curriculum or professional development, which captures a whole range of things like training in anti-racism or anti-oppression, what are the best practices from other faculties of health sciences in the country, and let us know what those are. So based on your environmental scan and your study of best practices, we hope that you will be able to formulate and document a series of recommendations and metrics that can be used by the Faculty of Health Sciences, with the ultimate goal that we're going to gather all of this fantastic work that you have done and develop it into a strategic plan for the Faculty of Health Sciences. So you'll note that we've got metrics on there because we do want to find ways that you'll not only recommend what you think should be happening, but how we can measure the progress that we have made. And the final area is to work together to find out what needs to be done on communication. So are there areas of educational scholarship that can be done on the work that the theme that your group is working at? Are there places that you can write about your work? And those may be academic writings, or they may be writing opinion pieces in newspapers. They may be writing blog posts and other forms of communication based on your work so that we share our stories far and wide. We are going to be supporting, and Giselle will be doing some of this work and supported by the executive table as well, on developing common frameworks and a set of definitions. And obviously each group will have an opportunity to provide feedback on those. Ultimately, this EDI strategy will have the mission, vision, and values of the Faculty of Health Sciences. Those are not things that we're going to be able to land on quickly, but as we all go forward together, we'll be able to develop that, and at some point in the not too distant future, come together as an entire group in the world when hopefully we'll be able to have 140 of us in a room together and land on what that strategy looks like. The next slide is a bit of a detailed slide, but I wanted to show this to you just because I'm so impressed with the composition of the groups and how we have got participation from all schools, as well as including, of course, basic sciences, and we've got also a great representation, not just from faculty and students, but also from staff, which is really fantastic to have. The next slide speaks to the fact that we are going to have an executive, and this is the composition of the executive at this point in time, and we will be very soon adopting terms of reference for the executive and for all of the working groups. There will be a representative from each of the working groups on the executive, as well as additional roles, which I'll talk a bit more about in a few minutes. I do acknowledge right up front that not every underrepresented group is at the executive table at this point. We will be open in the future to reevaluating whether we've got the right representatives at the table. It's as you know, you can often end up with a somewhat endless list, and we do want to be as inclusive as possible, but also try to keep the executive table a little bit on the smallish side, because that will be receiving obviously all the reports that you're doing, and doing some of the work around defining our vocabulary and confirming a diversity statement, for example. The next slide talks a little bit about some of these other vacancies that are on the executive. You've probably heard already from us about reaching out to let us know if you want to be one of these representatives at the table. Thank you to all those of you who have already indicated your interest in that. I will clarify that to be a representative at the executive does not rule out that you can also be part of a working group. That's definitely possible. And I will be making a decision as to who fills those vacancies and who might be a substitute for those vacancies based upon the applications that have come in, but also recognizing that we want to try and make sure we have good representation at the executive table from a range of schools, for example, within the faculty. And so there'll have to be a little bit of maneuvering to make sure that not everybody comes from one particular school, for example. The next thing I wanted to let you know about is that we are launching this in a formal way next week. And so I want you to mark this date on your calendar. There will be a launch of the initiative from 4:30 to 5 o'clock on September the 24th. There will be a formal meeting of the faculty board at which the terms of reference of the Dean's Action Table on EDI will be approved. All of this will be coming to you by email, so don't worry if it seems a bit confusing. So 4:30 to 5 is a formal business meeting of the faculty board to which you'll all be invited as their staff, students, or faculty. And then from 5 till 6 o'clock is when we're going to have a bit of a celebration. We're going to have some speakers that are there. I will be introducing not only those who are on the panel today, but some new members that we will be having as part of our Office of EDI, which will be announced that evening as well. And it will be a celebration of, and also a send-off to the work, so that the work will start in a good way, and we will have appropriate ceremony to recognize the beginning of this work. We also would really love to have, in the spirit of, I have a bias that you can't have a good celebration without a bit of music involved, and I'm assuming out of the 125 of you out there that there must be some musicians among you. So if you are interested in maybe a short performance piece, or you know someone that would like to celebrate the spirit of equity, diversity, and inclusion, please send any recommendations of musical artists to Giselle, and we would be happy to try to incorporate you in the program so that we can celebrate together. So with that, I think that kind of brings us to the end of this presentation, but I'm looking forward, especially now, to taking some questions. So I think, Giselle, you're going to moderate this portion and let me know what the questions are.
I'm waiting for them to come in.
Okay.
We have addressed
So
everybody's.
you will see a Q&A function on your screen, and it is open now for questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. And I'm seeing a few comments in the side panel, although not any that I think are in the form of a question at this point.
I'm not seeing any questions start to flow in. Oh, here we go. So Sophia Malik, hello. Can we access some information about the mandates of each working group?
So I will get Giselle to send out to you the list that we gave. That we're trying to keep it as simple as possible and recognize that you are all smart people and that you all are self-directed in many ways in your learning, and hopefully you'll be self-directed in this process. So we don't want to be too prescriptive as to how you're going to go about this. You'll have experts in professional development, for example, on some of your teams, and experts in a number of other realms. But essentially it is those 4 things to start off with that we'd like to send you off working on. That is to get the environmental scan, to study the best practices within that theme that you've been given, to make some recommendations to the Faculty of Health Sciences and the schools that comprise it, and then finally to think about how you can communicate the lessons that you're learning and the recommendations that you have.
So we have another question coming in. What are the expectations of the members of the executive? So duties and responsibilities.
We will have, as you see, the executive includes representatives from each of those groups. So the person who represents your working group will be there both as a voice to the executive about the kinds of things that you're doing, so that there'll be an opportunity for them to report to the executive as to the progress that you're making, but also to be a liaison back to the working group as to what's taking place. The executive will ensure that each group is making the progress that they're expected to, and provide a bit of direction. I want to acknowledge that some of the working groups are going to be harder than others. So I think one of the hardest ones is on the theme of culture and community, in part because it's not quite as clear as to how to study culture and community and how to change a culture. As it is to talk about admissions processes, for example. So some of those groups might need a bit more direction from the executive, and we'll discuss some of those things and provide feedback to them, as well as I indicated earlier, ensuring that we've got clarity around definition of terms and potentially developing a diversity statement that would be approved by the executive. So then Nassar says, some of the associated areas are mindset. Have we considered motivation and changing mindset? So that's perfect, Nassar, because that's exactly, as I mentioned, that one of the groups is really going to be tasked with this. So it's going to be a challenging group to look at how you change mindset, culture. There's that old saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, so that you can have all the strategy in the world and we can do all the recruitment in the world and the training in the world, but if the culture and the community are not welcoming and inclusive, that it will be really difficult. So I really look forward to the work of that group. Your ideas around, for example, how do we link into the rest of the university? How do we link into our community? What would it look like to expand the work of the Faculty of Health Sciences to ensure that there's actually progress on these issues in a community-wide way? So I don't have the answers to all of that, but I think it's really important, and we will definitely have one of the groups that's looking at that.
So Jane, some of the attendees also posted questions in the chat.
Okay.
So Costa says, thank you for taking time to read the responses for our applications. How did you come to lead this project?
Wow. I guess the short answer is that I came to lead this project because when I became dean, I wanted to set a few early priorities for our work here. And I picked areas where I thought it was important to go forward. So my three big areas are expanding research, working on innovations and integration of health systems, and then the third area around equity, diversity, and inclusion. But by definition, you can't do that work as a single person. You have to do it in community. So I wanted to find a way to get people involved. And this seemed like a good way to do it. And we're kind of experimenting as in the process as we go along. But I think it's going to be an interesting exercise. And I hope some of you will be interested in helping us to document this work. The longer answer in terms of, why did EDI come up on my radar? It's probably a longer story. I've had, again, acknowledging my own privilege, I've had amazing opportunities to learn that the world is a very unfair place. I grew up not in an affluent white family, but in a family that loved me and cared for me, and my world was pretty small. But once I went to medical school, I had opportunities to travel and work in sub-Saharan Africa. I actually spent a decade of my life working in Niger. Our firstborn child died in Niger, and that was a very informative, obviously an awful experience, but also really woke me up to realizing that in a country like Niger, 27% of kids don't reach the age of 5. And I learned through that and many other experiences just how unfair the world is, and that it doesn't seem right that the country that you're born in should be so, or the color of your skin, or the all of the other circumstances that are beyond our control should have such an impact in the rest of our lives. I also have had really amazing experiences of having traveled this country and visited remote places and learned from incredible First Nations, Inuit, and Métis friends and leaders, and learned a lot again about the inequity that exists in our own country. So those are some of my background experiences that made me realize when I got this incredible privilege of becoming the Dean of Health Sciences, I knew that we have to take the opportunities that are put in front of us to change the systems of injustices that exist in the world that drive inequity. And so it's essentially incumbent upon me to use the position of privilege that I have to be able to try to right some of the injustices that exist and that we become aware of.
And then Cheryl Klein has asked, will the working groups have outside support, for example, to assist with environmental scans, literature reviews, or is this work expected to be completed by the members themselves?
That's a great question. I'll actually maybe have you answer that, Giselle, because I know you were talking to Claudiana today about that very question. So maybe you can just give them a direct answer.
So we've working with the educational scholarship branch and the professional development branch, we're hoping that they will support some of this work as well, knowing that the members of these working groups will have demanding schedules. So as well, in addition, my own role and within the EDI office as a whole support this work. So expectation is that the burden won't fall completely on the members to conduct the environmental scans and create these surveys and facilitate all that work, pull out the peer-reviewed articles. The expectation there will be a support team to help assist with all of this work.
And I'll just add to that, but not wanting to give away all the surprises tonight, so we can save some surprises for next week, that you'll see just by today that our EDI team has doubled, because before we just had Courtney, and now we have Courtney and Giselle, which is amazing, as well as, of course, Mala's incredible leadership from a faculty member point of view. But hopefully next week we're going to have some more announcements about others that are being brought into the team. I hope you'll see this as a demonstration of our serious commitment to this work, that we're growing a team, and hopefully it will keep on growing with people that can provide the learning, the mentorship, the guidance. So stay tuned for more news on that.
Just trying to keep in mind the ordering of us they're coming in. So another one, and before I go back to the Q&A section, is from Christy. She says, can you elaborate on the new EDI team? But you, in many ways, you've addressed that in regards to, is this basically a mini department?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it qualifies as a department. I asked somebody the other day, what's the definition of an office in the Faculty of Health Sciences? And apparently there's no definition. So we're calling it now, as of today, breaking news, there is now a very small office of EDI in the Faculty of Health Sciences. It will get a little bit larger soon, and it will be a place that will be a resource to the entire faculty. And I'm really thankful for the people that are going to be part of it.
So if you want to go back, Jane, to the Q question answer, Faisal has a question. Can you comment on what, if any, relationship you hope for there to be between DAT EDI for FHS and other EDII activities that have started and will be ongoing at Queen's?
Thanks, Faisal, for the question and for your participation here. Absolutely, this is what's always challenging. There's some great stuff happening across the university, and you don't like to reinvent wheels, but we're such a big faculty and there's so much happening here that it's been my sense that we should have our own structure, which we hope that this table will be, that will allow us to go forward on specifically looking at EDI issues from the point of view of health sciences. But you're absolutely right, there's a lot happening across the faculty. I'm really excited to work with the other deans as well as other senior leaders in the university on some of this work. The principal, as you know, is really committed to these matters, and so there will be mechanisms to do that. I think in particular, for instance, if I can just speak to a specific example, one of the groups is focused on outreach and summer programs, which I think will be a really interesting group to work on. And I've had some conversation with the other deans about the possibility that if we are to develop summer mentorship programs, which other universities have done successfully as a way to sort of smooth the path for underrepresented groups to get into health profession schools, that those kind of summer mentorship programs should potentially be cross-faculty. Because sometimes high school students, for example, don't really know whether they want to go into medicine or law or education. And so we will definitely be coordinating some of those activities.
So, well, I would say, it says, thanks for the presentation. In terms of action plans, what timeframes are we planning for?
That's a great question, Whale. I'm cognizant of the fact that many of you are students, which is fantastic. And some students aren't actually here for very long. And maybe, hopefully you'll decide to stay around and continue to work with us. But some of you might only be here for this year and next year, and then you'll maybe be moving on elsewhere. So for that reason, as well as the reality that every day that goes by that injustices continue is another day that is a missed opportunity. So I don't want to, we have to strike the balance, and I'll be really open to hearing your views on this, to getting the balance right between the fact that you can't change culture and attitudes overnight, but at the same time, we want to try and work as quickly as we can. And so I'm being a little bit vague in that because we haven't set a deadline, for example. I would potentially like to see that we might be in a position by a year from now to be meeting all together and having a strategic retreat where we can validate the work that each of the working groups has done and put that together into a strategic plan. And confirm how we're going to go forward and make sure that we act on all of the recommendations. But as of yet, we haven't put a timeline on that. So I'm always open to your advice, and the executive table will, as we go along, try to solidify a little bit more clearly what some of those timelines are.
So Rylan Egan says we should consider efforts being made already in progress. So is there an opportunity to imagine what could be, as well as collecting and prioritizing what is currently being done?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Maybe there is no such thing as best practices. I Yeah, good, really great point, Rylan. So I think what's intended by the phrase of best practices is not only what's the best in the country, but what could be the best in the country in an ideal world, to imagine what could be and prioritize that. So absolutely, please interpret please interpret the desire to collect best practices to move us in the direction of doing better than the best, the current.
So just going back to the chat and trying to facilitate as they're coming in order. Anita Davies says, thank you for this amazing session. Will the FHS partner, sorry, my apologies, this question has already been asked, but partner with other universities on this initiative? But I guess you talked about other departments, my apologies, and faculties, but in terms of other universities.
Yeah, so first of all, Anita, I'm just so thrilled that you are part of our work here, and I'm really honored. You've got such an incredible track record yourself on these issues, and wow, to have someone of your experience join us and partner with us, I'm really thrilled about that. So thank you. And that's, as I said, there's some incredible people that are part of this process, and everyone's just stepping up and taking a place and recognizing that we've got to find a way to work everyone in together. But working with other universities, I think, is a really, really great idea. I was actually just before, literally this minute, before this started, I was on the phone with one of my colleagues who's a Métis scholar at the University of Calgary, talking about what they're doing. And Mala and I have been talking with her and talking about how we can partner together with other universities. So absolutely, I think there's a place for that, because what we're doing is a really grassroots initiative here. We know that in the case of medicine, for example, that the Association of Faculties of Medicine of Canada is doing work on equity. But what I think is kind of special about what we're doing, and I think is happening in a groundswell way at other schools across the country, is really doing that cultural transformation and trying to look at what this means in the day-to-day lives of our students, staff, and faculty. So I think that the more we collaborate across with other universities, not just in those sort of formal professional bodies, but in some of the work like this, I think that'll be great. So I will look forward to what you recommend.
So in alignment with that, Iman Bayumi asks, how do you think this important process can be grounded in the broader community outside of Queens, many of whom have stake in the outcomes of our actions?
Yeah, wow, Iman, again, I mean, I want to thank everybody every time I see each of your names here, because I know a little bit about some of you, and I'm just so thrilled that you've stepped up to be part of this. So I think that grounding in the broader community, and at some point I'd love to hear more of your thoughts, what's behind your question, but I referred earlier to just our local Kingston and Southeast Ontario region, I think, is part of our community, but you're right, sort of the broader community in terms of our patients and our families and our broader network. So I hope you will get the message, if you haven't already, that this is intended to be a very organic, iterative process. And I recognize that you need to have a certain amount of parameters around a work and set some terms of reference, but at the same time, it's a learning process, and therefore we need to be open to expanding and adjusting as we go along. So if you feel like there are pieces that are missing, please speak up about them. We'll have the formal mechanism, of course, through the working group representatives to suggest that you think you want to expand your scope, expand your mandate, and we're really happy to hear your thoughts on what that could look like.
Going back to the Q&A section, Susan Phillips asks, are less visible inequities like income deprivation on the table, and if so, how?
Yeah, Susan, I think that's a really great question, and possibly a hard one to get at. And so I'd love your advice as to how we can get at that. I think that we haven't made, for example, a representative at the table to represent people living with income inequality. I'm going to have to do some thinking about that one as to what is the best way to ensure that we capture that. And this is one in a list of other inequities that are not captured properly in the terms that we have developed so far. So Susan, I'm going to get you to give me some advice on that and send me a note.
Okay, and we have one more from Mona. So if students have EDI issues, is there a forum in the Faculty of Health Sciences?
So Mona, I'm not totally sure whether I completely understand your question, but I'm going to take a guess at it, and my apologies if I misinterpret. This would be in terms of sort of current issues that you're facing, inequities, structural barriers, racism, sexism, whatever it might happen to be. I'm going to assume that you're sort of like, where can I go and talk about this? We've had some early conversations, Giselle and I, about how we can try to find some better mechanisms for people to come forward in a safe way to be able to address that. At the moment, some of the schools do have places where you can, in a confidential way, express some concern about issues that you're facing. But I think this is an area where we probably do need to create more mechanisms of safe spaces that work for a broader range of people. And I see Courtney nodding her head. I know Courtney hears from people on a regular basis. So I would invite your suggestions as to what that looks like. We will be launching on the 24th, next Thursday, a web page within the faculty web page that will have resources around EDI. And we've had some discussion as to whether or not that should also be a place that will allow a place to reach out and give you a place to be able to speak safely and anonymously if necessary. Courtney, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just in my experience, Mala is one person that many people reach out to as the diversity director, although that is for School of Medicine, so nursing and School of Rehab and the Bachelor of Health Sciences now and school grad studies, all of the programs, they all kind of fall through the cracks. So students who are in my portfolio who self-identify as Indigenous have a person to go to, but we don't have my position for all groups that need it. So it's on the learner to really seek out those resources. So this EDI office will be that hub.
And if I can contribute to that as well, Jane, in terms of being a project manager, I'd like everybody to look towards me as an ally and an advocate. And I see my role as well as helping to faculty, staff, and learners to help navigate, to ensure that they find the appropriate resources, not only within the university, but outside of the university.
That's great. Okay. Have we covered most of the questions as far as you can tell there, Giselle?
Yeah, I haven't seen any more flow through.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for your participation. I'm really impressed with the fact that over 100 of you have gathered together. I really do look forward to when we can do this face-to-face, and I'm just want to thank you again for the time that you're putting into this. I don't have to obviously convince any of you of how important this work is, and I think that this is going to have a ripple effect that none of us can yet exactly imagine. But I believe that if we continue to work together in the spirit of acknowledging injustices, systemic discrimination and oppression that's taken place, to acknowledge that there's a tremendous amount to do to enable people to live in a healthy and equitable way and participate fully in society. We've all got some work to do to make this place fair and more inclusive, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am that we're going to do this work together. So, merci beaucoup, Chimigwech, Nyawe, Nakurmik, merci.